First 3 videos, I have over 1 million views. Same editor, same thing I'm talking about. It's because of my energy. It was also because of my belief system. Something I've been doing in my own journey lately. And I've been like, if you put yourself and your self-worth on an auction, okay? And you are like, okay, how much do I believe I'm worth? Where you're like, okay, I believe I can make 10 grand a month. Go up until you hit a ceiling where like it triggers something in you. Oh, that's not possible. And it was so interesting because my cap led me back to myself and led me back to like old beliefs and old things that like came from like when I used to work at Apple, like things that like I haven't explored in a long time, like old limiting beliefs from like 5 years ago. It's more than just manifestation. It's more of like a mirror, like, because here's the thing. I believe that when we carry ourselves a certain way, you know, if you're someone that was making 150 grand a month, you have different energy, you have a different confidence, and it shows in your posture. It shows on how you deliver yourself. That's why some of the wealthiest people in the world wear white t-shirts. They're just chilling. They don't need to prove anything. There's a certain peace in them. That's why that saying where it's like, just start, just go out there and just be a different version of you. You could pick like tiny little things, how you show up to a dinner wearing heels to work, right? Whatever that looks like. But that little flip in energy is like, it's potent. It is so potent.
Yeah. Sabrina Gher, welcome to Beyond the Cover.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming here. I know that the conversation today is going to be incredible. It's going to be a conversation that I think many people are hesitant to talk about, but I don't know why we should be. I believe that transparency is the best policy and honesty along with that. And we're talking about money today. And all of the things that surround it. But I don't know about you. For me personally, I was raised in an environment, this is outside of my household. I'm not just speaking specifically to the way that my parents raised me, but I almost felt like society as a whole, where we were told not to talk about our money, because if we did, you know, and we were made a lot, it was gloating, told not in the workspace to talk about how much money you made. It's like, keep that quiet. And so there were never discussions around it. It's basically like, you know, you work hard, you earn a living, but don't ever ask somebody how much they make, because that's rude. I think that was the biggest amount of sack of bullshit I've ever met in my life. You know, I've ever heard in my life. I hate it. I'm like, it's stupid. People found out that a lot of corporations would tell you not to talk about money because they didn't want other people talking about it, and then realizing like, wait, this person makes more than me. And then they start asking for a raise. And so there was that level of a lack of transparency where like they didn't want people talking about it in the workspace. The whole like gloating aspect, it's like, I don't see why we can't just have healthy conversations, you know? And for me personally, as I've heard people make more money, or like hear about people that are making 2 to 3 times as much as me, it sure, like it pokes at my ego, but then it drives me. Like when I came out to Scottsdale, I've never met so many wealthy people in my life. I grew up in a small town in Missouri where if you made over $100,000, if you made $101,000, you were rich. I made 6 figures coming out of college, straight into medical sales, which is good. I mean, that's still good to this day. But I was like, I was balling. I had my own place. I could have bought a nice car. I bought a Volkswagen. It was nice at the time. But like, I was big balling. And then I come out here and it's like, if you don't have $250,000, you're broke. I mean, and that's not what people say, but you can feel that way in Old Town. Old Town is a money pit. And so I found, you know, when I first came out here, I was a part of a real estate brokerage, and I met a 19-year-old, sorry, she's 21 now. She made $450,000 her first year in real estate at 19. And then I met, you know, other people that they're like, I was a millionaire by 21. And my ego at first was like, I don't like this. But then it started to push me. I was like, if a 21-year-old, if a 19-year-old can make this kind of money, then like your 31-year-old self better, or can if you choose to. So I've gotten to a place now where I'm like, the only way that I can get to that is by having these conversations and figuring out, hey, how did you make that kind of money? So I have to talk about it. So transparency has to be there. I think it's created a healthy dynamic. So with all that being said, Sabrina, on paper or on the cover, you are an 8-figure entrepreneur. 8. It's a lot of zeros. 8-figure entrepreneur. You're an author of Finance Feminine, which is a guidebook which utilizes oracle cards.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you explain to me what oracle cards are? Are they like, just go, actually, you know what? Go ahead and explain it to me.
Yeah, really quick. So oracle cards are like affirmation cards. They're basically a journal activity, but like you can use them with your hands. It's kind of like if you have a question, you want to expand your self-awareness, you want to expand the connection with yourself.
Yeah.
You can play around with oracle cards for motivation, for self-awareness, for spiritual connection. And it's really to help you progress in your own journey, whether that be like dating. For me, it's money. I teach a lot of people about money.
Yeah.
And it's an interactive tool.
Okay.
I find that a lot of people have trouble like poking at themselves. They're like, I feel stuck, but I don't know what I'm stuck with. And it's like they want tools, but they also don't want to open up to like a therapist or a stranger.
Okay.
And so it helps people just like dive into themselves.
Are the cards somewhat generic in this, or sorry, that's not the word, more generalized as opposed to specific? So like say that I want to focus on bettering my relationships, but then somebody else is focusing on bettering their finances. And this guidebook, I imagine, if I understand correctly, is like the cards are all the same in the guidebook. But if I pull it, I'm going to pull it with, and it's going to say something that I would say be the same card that somebody might pull for finances, but it's my interpretation of the card that's going to impact me differently than for somebody that's pulling a card on relationships.
Correct. So like if you're like, I really want a promotion, I've been trying to get a promotion, I can't find an opportunity.
Yeah.
I keep applying for jobs. What is it? What's getting me stuck?
Yeah.
You pull a card and like I have my cards it's a 53 card deck.
Yeah.
So like this morning I pulled sabotage.
Okay. So
right. So you could be like, maybe you're sabotaging yourself. And there's a little journal exercise that says like, write 5 ways that you're sabotaging yourself. Here are some examples. And most likely your answer is there. I always tell people like where you're blocked, where you are, where you victimize yourself, where you're pointing fingers is usually a mirror and your answer is like right in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I actually love that because sabotage, I don't know if anybody would prompt themselves to like wake up one day and go, how am I sabotaging myself? Somebody might, because they might be like, I feel like I'm swimming upstream. But what's awesome about an oracle card for what you just described is like somebody might not even think about the word sabotage.
Exactly.
So now you're throwing it in front of their face.
Yeah.
And not only that, you're saying, give me 5 instances of you doing so. And someone might be like, okay, now I have to try to think like how for 5, not just 1, but 5. So the first one may come quick, right? And that's top of mind. That's conscious mind. But then the other 4 might be subconscious. Yeah. And that's where I found personally a lot of the answers lies in the subconscious.
I will say, like, disclaimer on this podcast, if I deeply trigger you while you're listening to this, it is an excellent mirror for you to look within.
Yeah.
Like I usually say, I'm usually a reflection for other people.
Yeah.
So if I'm triggering, then I'm like, amazing. Write down what pissed you off.
Yeah.
That is like the key to whatever you're looking for.
Yeah.
That you're, pointing fingers at. So
I want to highlight that for a second, that statement you just made. It's so true. If there is something triggering you about me, then it's likely reflective upon something that you're not satisfied with in your own life. And so a lot of times, I saw from my audience, it's like when they start seeing me, I was getting a lot of blowback for dancing. A lot of people saying, this is cringy. This is embarrassing. He should stop. Why are you doing this? And they were typing this to me. You need to stop. This is so cringy.
Can I tell you what it is?
Please. Yeah, please. I feel like I know what I learned from it, but what do you think that was from?
A lot of people need permission to be like creative, and they're usually very blocked. And so by you being creative and expressing yourself in ways that they would be judged by their peers and their friends, a part of them wants to express themselves in that way. And they feel trapped, and they also they self-impose shame and judgment towards it. And so they look at you and they're like, who the F does that guy think he could be dancing and being ridiculous, right? Because it's an extension of them not wanting to express that, wanting to express themselves, but not knowing how. And
their ego not allowing them.
Yeah.
And so I'm a direct threat to their ego because they're saying, who the hell is this guy? Their ego is. And how dare he basically be a shining example of what I wish I could be, but I'm too fearful to become.
Yeah.
And so they would rather me be at their level. So they don't want to see somebody, expressing themselves while they're not, because I'm the reminder. Hey, you could do this, but you're not. And so that now they have an attack on their ego. So in effect, what they do is they try to now get me to close back off and shut myself down and stop opening up and being carefree and having fun.
Yeah.
Because if I pull that back and stop, now they have one less example of somebody doing something that they're not doing.
Well, it also proves that I was right. That expression, is not the way to happiness and fulfillment and all that. Actually kind of goes back to what you were saying in the beginning and in your introduction, where it's like a lot of people are very triggered by money. And I always tell, that saying where it's like, show me your partner in life, your partner of life, your romantic partner, and it'll tell me everything that you are.
Yeah.
It's similar to like how you view money and abundance. It's like, show me your wounds with money. Show me your belief around what you think you're capable of, or like where it triggers you, and I'll tell you what your perceived self-worth is.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where your wounds are with self-worth.
Yeah.
And because really, when we look at self-worth, and I was just teaching a talk on this the other day, when someone is really unfulfilled, because we've all experienced, I mean, like being a millennial, like, there's like a saying, it's like millennials can't take a side hustle and not turn it into money, right? We're like constantly looking for things to be fulfilled in.
Yeah.
If you are unfulfilled in your job or in a business, whatever it is, that means your self-worth is so high in one level of your life, and you haven't allowed yourself to express your self-worth in other areas. Yeah. So like if you're a high achiever, and it happens a lot with women, I've walked this path so I can share it. But like as a high achieving woman, my worth was so attached to money that I suffered in dating, right? Where like I wasn't able to express myself spiritually or creatively or incorporate humor in my life, right? Yeah. And so my dating suffered because dating's supposed to be fun. Dating's supposed to be playful. Dating's supposed to be everything but that, right? Yeah. And so that's just my own past core wounds with dating. But when I help a lot of people with money and increasing their self-worth and believing that they're worth, $500,000 a month. I know people that make that amount of money. Yeah. And, a lot of people will come to me, and it's usually people who feel insecure. They're like, well, I hear this all the time. They make a lot of money, but they're probably miserable. I'm like, yeah. Actually, they're pretty happy. Yeah. They're spiritually connected. They have great partners. Yeah. They've walked their walk. Like, why does it mean that you have to be wealthy and miserable? Why do you have to look for the one wound in someone who is perceived to have it all? Right?
I interpret it as because they are trying to justify why I don't have money and why I shouldn't go get it.
Or why it's bad.
It's bad. Yeah. And so again, I think it goes back to ego, as a lot of things in my life I have found do go to this place, because the ego is the sense of self. It's the protector. It wants to make us feel safe, and we don't want to feel insufficient. And so the ego looks at somebody and they go, yeah, they got all those things, but they have so more money, more problems. And so our brains say, I don't want more problems, but I would have that if I had money. So I don't actually really want that. But it's a lie that we tell ourselves, and it's why it's not satisfying. It's why we always end up like still going back and daydreaming and thinking about the house on the beach and the fast car and the wealthy lifestyle. And then we start getting, again, we get those feelings bubbling up of, well, I want this. And then we instantly go right back to that negative mindset of, well, or the other, it will go to this realm of, oh, well, they probably got from daddy's money. It's probably daddy's money.
I get that a lot. Yeah, which is so interesting.
So I do want to dive into your background with money to gain a better understanding. So, did you grow up with money?
No, I didn't. So. Okay. I grew up with, first of all, I love to say that I grew up with the biggest abundance because I grew up with parents that are still together that were an incredible support system for me. So I think that's to me, that's real wealth. Yeah. When we talk about wealthy. My parents are still together. They're amazing. They're immigrants. So my dad was from Turkey. My mom was Venezuelan. They met in New York. Yeah. So I'm from the East Coast. And my parents were like living the American dream. They like grew up with, we came to this country, we don't speak English, we got to like figure it out. We got to like, believe in hard work, and months were really scarce because they're making ends meet in the most expensive city in the world.
So they're paycheck to paycheck, essentially.
Paycheck to paycheck. Okay. Learning a new language, like figuring all this stuff out. Yeah. And at some point they had success. They did. We were young, my sister and I, so it's just the four of us. And during the basically from 2007 to 2010, the crash that impacted many people. Yeah. My parents were one of them. I was 16, so a really transformative age. Yeah. I think a lot of things happen in that high school time frame, like your beliefs around self-confidence, around romance, like all these things. A lot of our wounds come from there.
Moldable. Yeah. I've heard from anywhere from like 6th grade is when we start developing a sense of awareness. And then it goes all the way through like into your teens.
But it's also probably like when people get their first job. So you're like, okay, like my first buck, right? How do I spend it?
Yeah.
And I just remember at that time, my parents being like, we went from having a really supportive, loving home. We didn't have like anything crazy, but we had stability when I was a kid, again, which is like one of the greatest gifts that I could have had. And I never like to underestimate that impact.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting because we went from stability to everything was normal and stable and predictable to holy shit. Like my parents lost their emotional connection for my sister and I because they were so focused on trying to get the business back. And they were basically like trying to pour more money back into their business, which by the way, wasn't the move. Like the business was just declining and it was on its way out. And really it couldn't be salvaged, but they didn't know that.
What was the business?
It was like in IT. Okay. It was like old technology that doesn't even like, it's not even relative today. Now. Yeah.
Okay.
So in my head at 16, I thought money means love. Money means love. Money means emotional connection. Money means worthiness and value as a human.
Because you were tying that to when you had an abundance of money.
Yeah. I received love and connection
from your parents. Yeah. But when they lost the money, now all of a sudden they're not paying as much attention to you seemingly. And so you drew a parallel there.
But also I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
So as an older child, are you the oldest?
I am the oldest, yeah.
Yeah.
Of three,
you kind of have this thing where it's like, okay, I'm the oldest to know what's going on. Let me try to like save it. Let me help.
Yeah.
It was like, let me help.
Yeah. I felt like trying to be the savior so many times.
Yeah.
For my younger
by the
siblings.
way, Carrie's in dating. But
oh, does it?
Yeah, it does. But like, it's amazing because I was like, let me save them. So I'll never forget. It was Christmas. I was like 16. I had like saved all this money. My Christmas gift was like, here, mom and dad, here's money. And my mom like lost her marbles seeing that. It like broke them, because it's like, what the hell am I doing to like my daughter who's like 16 is like trying to make ends meet for us, right? Like, why don't we get our shit together basically? So this happened probably for like 2 years. It was just a cycle of like chaos in our family.
Yeah.
And I emotionally disconnected from them. I got into alcohol, bad habits. I was like hanging out with the wrong kids in school, all the high school things like smoking.
Do you think that was reflective? Like, was the catalyst basically your parents struggling financially and basically emotionally distancing themselves? Do you feel that that's what led you to the play, or was it more
it's a domino effect? It's a domino effect because the thing is like when you see this a lot in younger kids, and especially with like divorced parents with their kids who now are the divorced child sharing their story later on. Mm-hmm. It's like I was looking for because there was so much chaos going on in my house. I didn't know how to treat myself with love. I didn't know what gifts I was good at. I didn't have a chance to play. I didn't have a chance to create. Yeah. Like I wasn't the kid that was like, we can't wait to like, send you off to college for your passion, sweetie. It was like, hey, we can't pay for that. I don't know if we're ever going to pay for that.
Yeah.
Like we can't even pay attention to you.
Yeah.
And so for me, I just felt a lot of like neglect. And so I think, by the way, this is all subconscious. Like I've done processing and therapy years later where I'm like, why did I get into, drugs and dating the wrong guys and like all this stuff? And I think I was looking for attention. And I think I was also like looking to pour back into me.
Well, it could have been also a coping mechanism.
Oh, it totally was. And what's wild too? Those coping mechanisms show up later on in life. So like at the height of my career, a couple of years ago, this was a corporate career. Now I'm a businesswoman, but at the height, I remember like I felt really unfulfilled after my days. I used to work for Apple in corporate and I would come home and I would like drink. It wasn't anything problematic, but it was just like, I need to eat. I need to self-soothe. It's funny. I work with a lot of clients who they're actually working on their self-worth with money. So I'm like, let's go from 10 grand a month to 60. And it's like people start losing their marbles. And when they have to shift their identity, because it's all an identity game. This is all an identity shift.
Yeah.
When you shift your identity, your nervous system is so rocked because you're like, oh my God, like, is this who I am? Are these my habits? Like, I'm not worthy of this. It's like your alarms go off. So what do? You emotionally eat. So like a lot of the clients that I work with who like had obesity issues when they were 11, they're like, Sabrina, I can't stop eating. Like, and I'm like, it's so funny how money, like your journey becoming better often has you go back and visit old comforting things,
Yeah, and I think
self-soothing things.
And I think what's happening from a biological standpoint, again, I'm no expert on this, but my understanding is that as you take on a new identity, you're taking on the unknown. And when you take on a greater sense of unknown, that comes with a lot of instability. And from a evolutionary standpoint, when we are in a place of unknown, well, that could have been the difference between life or death. Back when there was cavemen and cave women and women, and they were all it's like when you walked outside of that cave, you could get attacked by an animal, so you had to always be on high alert. And and you had to go out and hunt and physically go take something and bring it back to the family. And so as if you walked into a watering hole or whatever that you've been to 100 times, now your brain starts to go, okay, this is safe, or I know how to navigate this environment. But whenever you're in an unknown environment, because from an evolutionary standpoint, you're on high alert. And so now you have cortisol's up, that stress hormone. So now you have higher cortisol. And so what we do is when we have high cortisol, we try to balance it with high dopamine. So basically it's like, hey, I'm high stress. So that's why people then go to stress eating, and they eat these foods that release dopamine, and it makes them feel better. So that's why we have comfort foods, because they're regulating hormones is what we're trying to do. And we're not even aware of it half the time. We're just subconsciously engaging in that behavior.
100%. And also just to add to that, like sabotage can also be for good things.
Mm-hmm.
People think, I read the book by Brianna Weiss, The Mountain Is You.
I've read that book. Recently. It's
when
good.
People win the lottery, they sabotage because they're like, oh my God, I'm being stretched in every capacity, right? That's why people sabotage in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
They have something really good come their way and they're like, this can't be true.
Yeah.
And so going back to like the alcohol thing for me, it's so interesting because I had ways to self-soothe as a 16-year-old. And then my parents and I were super disconnected. I was kind of like in a state of numbness.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to New York City. So this was all in New Jersey.
Okay.
I lived 20 minutes from New York City. When people ask me, where are you from? I'm always like, honestly, both, because I grew up like 20 minutes from the city. I spent most of my life there.
Yeah.
So I get to the city and I finally feel like this freedom. Like, oh my God, there's so much to create. There's so much to build. There's so much to do. And it shocked me because I could be sitting on the train with a billionaire. By the way, everyone in New York, fair game. Like, if there's traffic, you're taking the train. Like, it's fair game.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could be sitting next to the wealthiest person and the poorest person, and we're all on the same journey. And like, I could be in like a shithole tiny apartment living next to a billionaire 40 floors up. And like, we shared the same real estate,
Yeah.
And so it really had me question myself. I'm like, okay, I don't want to be like my parents. I'm still in a state of fight or flight, by the way. I was in a state of fight or flight till I was 22, and then I moved to Arizona, but that's another story. But I surrounded myself with really wealthy people. I bartended. I made ends meet. I hustled very young. And my nervous system was so fried by the time I was 20. Like, so fried. I was exhausted. I looked awful. I was stressed, and I was just like in this constant mode of like doing, which, by the way, I didn't get to address until I was 27 or 28 years old. So I like to say to a lot of people, like, my success actually came from my trauma, because I never wanted to address deeper parts of myself. I found a way with money. I did.
Yeah.
But I ran towards it.
Money can become a distraction.
Money can become a distraction. Money can also become a way of like, the journey getting there can also be it depends on what energy you're coming from, actually. So when we look at like a spectrum of energy, right? The lower levels of energy are like shame, guilt, sadness. They're not bad emotions. We have to experience those things. That's that's being a human.
Yeah.
But as you go higher, there's love, joy, creativity, inspiration. Those are higher levels of energy.
Yeah.
You can make money on the spectrum.
Yeah.
You can make money from any point.
Yeah.
I know if you look at think about, I don't know, like some people in the UFC, or even like I know some creators, male creators, who like built a lot of things from anger. Like, look at Eminem. A lot of his older music came from anger.
Yeah.
And so, you can build wealth from a spectrum of things.
Mm-hmm.
It just shows me what you value and what you're suppressing. So what areas are you suppressing that you're not, fully allowing yourself to be in?
Yeah.
And I'll usually tell you, why you feel a certain way or why you're unfulfilled.
You bring up something interesting that I don't know if I'm fully able to conceptualize it, because I've never had this thought before. But with the intensity of emotions, or the spectrum of emotions, you can make money off of something lower level, or or something higher level. But I have to imagine that if you go high or really low, where like you have shame or you have, happiness and pure bliss, it's like, but that's going to require a higher vibrational frequency. Therefore, like it's probably not as sustainable as finding some emotion that you can regulate in the middle.
So most entrepreneurs and most celebrities that are fully self-made and logical about their fame. So like, I'm not talking about like people who were born into fame and they're overwhelmed by it. I'm talking about like people who like the Hermoses, use them, right?
Yeah.
They're in like the 400s when you look at energy, which is usually like logic driven, acceptance, like they accept themselves. They know who they are. They're pretty logical. They usually create from inspiration. Like they're pretty well rounded. So
when you say, because when you say acceptance, I think not complacent, but like lukewarm, kind of like, hey, I'm accepting this. I'm at peace. There's a sense of calmness to that, which again, so that's what
accepting oneself.
Yes.
Where they're like another form of acceptance, which isn't great, but this is a lower level energy. It's called apathy.
Okay.
Where you're like, whatever, I'll never be that. So might as well accept it and stay here. That's different. That's a different level.
That's closer to complacency to me, like the way I view it, which is dangerous because then it's like you're basically stunting growth.
Correct.
Because you're just kind of whatever.
Well, when you look at the word depression, like literally the word, there's suppression, there's repression, there's depression. Depression actually comes from suppressing expression, having such a consistent level of numbness where you don't even want to feel anything. At that point, your brain's just like, shuts off. And it usually comes from a level of apathy. That's where you don't have inspiration for anything. You're like, I don't want to brush my hair. I don't want to do anything. And that's when it becomes like mental health, right? Mental illness.
Yeah.
So when you look at the energy and where people create from, you can make money from any of it. But I will say that and I always remind people of this, you're not chasing wealth for the money. You're chasing wealth and the relationships and whatever you're going after in life for the feeling it gives you.
Yeah.
So when we attach ourselves to like, I need to get that job because that job is going to give me that feeling, you're actually like shutting off a lot of other opportunities. That's why like, manifestation, all these things are talk about flow and being like able to receive and being open and not attached because you're supposed to be open to be able to receive things in different ways, but you're really chasing the feeling.
Yeah.
So when you look at wealth creation and, I did create an 8-figure business. It's actually considered 9 these days. And I was not happy in that business. Now, it wasn't that it actually had nothing to do with the money. It's that I was in such a high state of stress and I was pushing down so many things that I wanted to express that I just didn't have the time for, that it pushed me into like a state of not depression, but I just felt like a numbness towards my life. I felt like, I kind of forgot what it felt like to have my spark back.
Yeah.
So that's where I always remind people it's not the money. Money does contribute to some happiness and abundance and freedom and all those things. But you also have to be expressing yourself as a person. There also needs to be some level of fulfillment. Otherwise, what are you doing it for, right?
Yeah.
I actually know quite a bit of miserable, wealthy people.
So would you say that, having a 9-figure business, that's a lot of money. And I imagine with a 9-figure business, that comes a lot of responsibility.
Yes, it did.
And so I'm going to guess that every day, while yes, you're having these like moments of, oh my gosh, I just did a $100,000 deal, or I did a $20,000 deal today. I made some people, I know people that make $40,000 a year and they're happier than ever. Right. But I also know people that make $40,000 in a split second. And what I found is, as I've started to elevate my sense of, as I started to make more money, I started to see my stress levels rise because now I got $20,000 deals on the line. I've never had that ever. Prior to my life, I was a salary plus commission. Then I went full commission, but still even at the full commission in corporate America, I basically knew what I was going to make per month. I knew because it was like the previous guy before me was making that. So they're like, you're going to likely make this. And so then month to month, I would look at my paycheck and what do you know? It's following a track. But then what happens is I go into entrepreneurship and it's like all of a sudden I was making more in a month than I was making in half a year. And I'm like, whoa. But then the next month I might not make anything. And so I was like, it was this up and down effect, but I was playing with more money. I had more cards at the poker table or whatever, more chips.
Yeah.
And what happened, I started realizing I was getting burnt out because I was waking up every day and I'm like, today I'm either going to make 20 grand or I'm going to make zero. Because I'm either going to get the deal or I'm going to lose it. And so then I started just like every day I was waking up high stress, on edge. And I realized that it's like I started burning myself out, and then I had to take breaks, and I was like, I need to go travel for a week, or I needed to shut down for 2 days. Like I couldn't maintain making that amount of money because I was like, I'm not ready to handle this many deals. But then I had to be able to take it as like, hey, I started wiring my brain to go, what is meant for me will be. So if I lose something, it was never meant for me in the first place. And that was able to help me calm my nerves. Whenever I lost something, I wasn't dwelling for 3 days about, I just lost 20 grand. It was like, it wasn't ever meant for you. And you gained a better understanding of how to interact with somebody. You know, this deal didn't work out. So figure out why it didn't work out, and then now learn from it. So that the next time you face an individual that has those type of character traits, or a situation that brings those players in the game, you're going to likely score, as opposed to, get rejected at the rim or whatever it might be. I use a lot of, sports terminology because I was an athlete, but it made sense for me where I'm like, okay, I have to change the way that I'm thinking. That's what's sabotaging me. For me, it was my mind.
Sure.
I was in my head being like dwelling on the fact for a week that I lost a deal, when it's like, people that have a lot of money and are good and know how to balance, they lose that deal. They're like, okay, what did I learn? And they take it, they might sulk or think about it for 30 minutes, and then boom, they're on the next deal. And the ones that are really, really high, make a ton of money, like they won't even dwell on it for more than 5-10 minutes.
It's so fascinating because I usually have like 2 different types of people that I work with. Mm-hmm. I work with people that need help with their self-worth to go from A to B. They really want to be somewhere else in their life. They want to explore more money, more abundance, all that. Yeah. They're already somewhere, but like they're stuck somewhere. They're either unfulfilled at a job, or they're not making enough money in their business, and they're kind of yo-yoing. Yeah. And then I work with another type of client, which is they already have some kind of success. It happened to them because they followed, like the problems in the first group that I mentioned is you're not being authentic enough. You're not listening to your gifts. You're not in flow. Your ego is huge. It's blocking you. You have to do a bunch of uncomfortable shit that like, you're like, oh. Second group of people already did that. Mm-hmm. And they had like a crazy threshold up on their way out of that. So it's like, for example, I left my job at Apple when I was 27. And then I listened to my passion. I followed, my authentic, like all the things that like I teach group A. And I started a business and it exploded. Like in our first year, we raised, I think, like $38 million or something. Wow. It's a private equity fund. So it's a different business model. It's not like our business was doing, that much a year. It's capital raised. So it's a different type of business. But it was a lot of responsibility. And it's so interesting because I didn't have enough time to catch up with what was happening. So it's like similar, right? You start making money and then you're like, what is happening? What is happening, right? It's like when you date someone amazing and you're like, what is happening, right? Mm-hmm. Is this too good to be true? How do I, like, it's so interesting because you are coming from a place of reactivity. So you're just like, you're not responding. Responding is like, let me think and let me choose to react, to say something, right? Let me think about it. Reacting is just like, everything's on fire. Like, let me, like, whatever fire I'm going to put out, right? And so it's interesting because in the 3D world, you have like real money coming in, real clients, like people that are coming after you. In your internal system, you're like, I don't have, like, it's so interesting because you're reacting, you're not choosing, you're not intentional with what you're creating. So usually the next level up is, let's create some systems and tools, and like not only for your business, but like for how you perceive yourself. Because if you perceived yourself as someone who could handle $200,000 months and you're not like yo-yoing or freaking out because you can't handle it, you would take a step back and be like, okay, I'm going to take a breather. I'm okay losing these 3 people this week. I'm going to figure out who I am and how I'm going to serve the person that I want to become. So if I want to create $100,000 months, what does my life look like? Yeah. Instead of it's coming at me and like I'm reacting and freaking out, because that was me for 3 years actually, because it was continuous. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was like hiring people, all these things I was never used to. And so we usually sabotage that way. We also don't treat people well that way because you're not the best. If you're reactive, you're not a great leader. Like we see that in so many bosses and people. Like we've all had like one reactive boss, and we don't love that person. They're usually angry. They're quick to snip at you, or like you don't know what's going on as someone who works for that person. You're like, am I doing well? Like, what's happening? You know,
what is your opposite to reactivity? Because I have a word that I use, but I'm curious, like, what's your opposite to, if someone's not reactive, or, you know, what should they be instead?
Intentional.
Okay. So you use the word intentional.
Yeah.
In what way? Like, what does an intentional leader look like?
An intentional leader knows the direction they're going in. And even though it might not be clear, they hold the lantern for everyone else. And they know how they respond when things get really foggy. And they know how they carry themselves in certain environments. That might not be that they know it forever all the time, but it's more like they trust themselves and they know what they're building. And so they can create that for other people. And they can also create that lifestyle for themselves. It's actually not that hard. It's just like you need to stop for a minute and be like, oh, wow, like I didn't realize like everything was on fire, but I wasn't putting it out the right way. You know, I needed to kind of step up and take a minute and be like, who am I creating? What's happening? Do I even like what's around me? Do I like what I created? Yeah. But most people live in that fire mode, especially going from, if we're talking about, you know, the second group of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, like I always say proactive versus reactive. And so, but I think with
oh, I like that word. Yeah. It's intentional.
To me, it's intentional still though. Like when I'm being proactive, I'm being mindful because because reactive is just basically something's thrown in front of me and now I have to, you know, basically respond however I'm responding in this present moment. Whereas, you know, proactive says, hey, let me think about scenarios that could present, i.e. be mindful. And then how would I react in each of these situations? Okay, well, if this were to happen, I would want to then build these systems. So let me build these systems. I'll build these so that whenever the situations present, I am going to stay cool, calm, and collected, right? An intentional leader is one that, as you were describing them, I'm thinking they're calm, they're courageous, they're confident, and they provide a sense of security to those that are around them that, hey, this whole place looks like it's burning down, but then they look to their leader and their leader is just calm. On the surface, they might internally be like, okay, this is not looking good. But we see this happen all the time. When somebody has in our day-to-day lives, an example that's popping up in my head is like, whenever you're in a situation where things are tense, where there's a fire going on, or I'm going to use an example for flying. I hate flying. I don't like it either. It bothers me. And it's because it's a loss of control. Somebody said that flying is basically just being up in the air 30,000 feet in a metal tube. I was like, great. Now I'm even more like anxious about flying. I was like, I wish I would have never have heard someone say that because I was like, that's exactly what it is. And so what happens when I'm in the plane where I get a high sense of anxiety is turbulence. So if turbulence hits, I'm like, oh, the plane's going down. That's what my brain says. It's like bounces. And whenever it's a smaller plane, it's even worse. And so like they're bouncing around. And what do? I look at the flight attendant. Because I'm looking at somebody, that's my leader in that moment. I'm like, hey, I'm looking at someone subconsciously that has a world of experience. And I'm like, if they're cool, calm, and collected, then this plane's not going down. But if I looked at that flight attendant and they're like, oh my, everyone buckle up, and they're in the corner and they're shaking, I'm like, oh, we're screwed. Right? Because they're every day they're in a plane for sometimes multiple times in a day. And so I'm looking at someone with experience and I'm looking at them for peace and stability. I'm like, if I look at you, I hope that you're calm and courageous and confident. Because if you are, that calms me down. And so that flight attendant is my sense of strength and my sense of confidence in that moment. And that's the same thing that people want to see in a boss and in a leader and in someone that's managing a 9-figure business. It's like, I want to look to them and be like, you're managing my millions of dollars. And like, they don't want to see you being like, this place is on fire, running around hectic. You would be like, hey, I got it. I've done this before. Hey, like we've seen this happen before. Okay. But the money will come back and here's how we're going to do it. Right. Because
totally.
You've built the systems.
So fun fact, I learned this. I did a breathwork facilitation training in June just to understand and better regulate my system.
Yeah.
And I learned this. I thought it was fascinating. So that, like the flight attendant example that you gave, that's actually a natural, innate, instinctual thing that we have as bodies. So our nervous system, like I think it's like 60% of all communication, don't quote me to that number, but I think it's like 60% of all communication is actually nonverbal. And it's our nervous system scanning for other people's nervous systems. Mm-hmm. So like even that podcast example that you told me the other day, like how you had a studio that was set up a little differently.
Yeah.
That like someone's nervous system's probably going to be like, whoa, guard up, don't love that setting.
Yeah.
And another thing I learned, which I thought was fascinating, was we actually, like you do like an iOS like update on your phone, we copy our parents' nervous systems until the age of 8 or 9. So if your parents were like always freaking out or always like, you know, my mentor actually had told me that when he was little, his parents used to freak out if he got hurt. He's a boy. He was like flying off his bicycle and like hurting himself all the time. He would be more afraid to come back home to his mom to show her that he was injured rather than the actual injury.
Yeah.
Because like they freaked out all the time. And so one thing I teach all the time, and it's like if there's anything that anyone gets from this episode, because I think self-awareness is the biggest gift that we can ever gift ourselves ever.
Absolutely.
If there's anything that like anyone wants, like from in terms of self-help, it's like go back to self-awareness. And I always ask people, who is running the show in your life? Who is running the show? Like me sitting here on the podcast with you, I know the future self that I want to be. And I'm sitting here talking to you as that version, right? Like that person is the one that's running the show.
Yeah.
When we are in relationships and we are triggered, when we have these ceilings for what we think we're worthy of with money or with business, with anything in life, who's running that show? Is it your mom who like instilled scarcity beliefs in you as a kid? Was it like, you know, your nervous system that you were like trying to figure out like in your teens? So I love talking about, I love helping people identify as that, identify what that is for them, because the biggest gift you can give yourself is understanding what levers to pull so that you can exponentially grow. And it sits in our triggers, and it sits with who's running the show. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think something that I've touched on recently, or I've started to dive into, is the conscious versus subconscious mind. And what's really fascinating is that you can categorize a lot of people in the subconscious autopilot state of mind on a daily basis. And so what does that look like? Well, autopilot, like our bodies will our minds are so incredible where when you go to your first day of work at a new job, you got your maps pulled up and you have to look and see, okay, now this turn, then this turn. And when I get to here, like I'm going to show up, I'm going to walk into the office and I don't know who's going to come up to me. My boss is going to come up right away, say hello. You know, I got to figure out what like systems are in play here. I got to learn them. So what software are they using? And so when you're first day on the job, I mean, your conscious mind is firing on all cylinders. Like because there is no autopilot. You're like, I haven't created the autopilot. I can't go into subconscious. But then what happens is our brain, in order to grow more, has to like push things into the autopilot category, because that way it's like, hey, I can save energy and not this becomes just like second nature in order for me to now then like become conscious again in another area. I think what happens is a lot of people, they get into this place of subconscious autopilot, which is comforting because it's like, hey, I know when I go to work today, I know exactly who I'm going to walk in and see, talk to, and I don't have to worry about some unknown environment popping up. The problem is that complacency can start to set in, and then people get really comfortable in that place of subconscious autopilot. And so then they recreate that beyond the workplace. They go home, they pull their phones out, and they're on subconscious autopilot scrolling through social media. I mean, people they lose their sense of time for an hour, 2 hours scrolling. And they start to an hour or two in, start to feel guilty because we're not meant to stay in autopilot. And growth doesn't occur in subconscious autopilot. It occurs in the conscious state of mind. And when our conscious mind actually starts looking at our subconscious and saying, hey, there's another form of the subconscious where it's like you have all these deeply rooted beliefs and values and things that you picked up from childhood and from your parents that like you don't realize like they carried on into adulthood. You know, and I heard this massive fallacy, this mindset of like, hey, like just give it time, it'll go away. No, it never does.
Give it time and it'll bake in longer.
And it'll manifest into something deeper. So, you know, I looked at it when I was in 7th grade. I felt that I wasn't good enough in the eyes of others because, and how I was judging it was based on my accolades. So was I getting ribbons? You know, and winning, you know, at track meets, and I started comparing myself to my middle brother, who all of a sudden he gets more ribbons than me. He's getting first place trophies. I'm getting third place. I'm not even placing, and you know, and so I'm getting judged by my peers and how great of an athlete I am, and you know, I'm a 4-string quarterback as a freshman, so I'm sitting on the bench, and so all the kids that, you know, my friends that were first string, you know, quarterbacks and scoring touchdowns, all the girls are paying attention to them, and so it's like everything was accolade based because at that point there's no maturity. You know, the mind's very immature. And so it thinks that like what I will get validation by the amount of accomplishments that I accrue. So then what did I do? I went on this life journey to accrue as many accomplishments as I could. Now, I went to the NFL, made it all the way to the highest level, and I was getting external validation all along the way. The problem is that, the second that I lost the NFL, there went the validation. So then I go, okay, well now I got to go into medical sales. So then I went into medical sales and I'm working with doctors. So I'm not a doctor, but I'm working with them. I'm making 6 figures. So again, I'm like, here come all the accolades again. But then all my friends start catching up financially with money. And I'm like, wait, I'm not getting validation here. I don't even actually really care. Like this industry's okay, but it's not really like what I love to do. Then I go on The Bachelorette and become the Bachelor. And it's like, again, I kept chasing and I kept, accomplishing things that people would never will in their lifetime and at the highest level. And I still felt unsatisfied all through all that because it's like, it goes all the way back to my 6th grade hardwiring of like looking at and being like, I don't feel good enough. And the fact of the matter is I would have been good enough if I would have just chosen to believe I was, but I made a conscious, unconscious choice or subconscious choice that day to place my value in others people's hands. And I never found satisfaction until I internally validated my own self.
Oof, that's basically, that was me. And it's so interesting because I don't know, it's such an important life lesson to learn early on because I think it sounds like you're like a very transformative person. You've like lived many lives like I have. Like I've just lived in many different cities and states and had many different careers. And it's interesting because I feel like when you hit a certain level of success where you're constantly being known for something, whether it be the NFL person or for me, the businesswoman, I took a backseat in my business in May. I took a shareholder position, kind of took a step back because I wasn't in my zone of genius. I was suppressing certain parts of me and I decided to take a gamble, take less equity of my shares of the business and focus on me. Yeah. And that by this like super vulnerable, but like when I left my business, I was so used to being like the public accolades and recognition and the Forbes and all the stuff. And like without that, I still own the business, but like it was without my daily, like me living in that identity every day and me like valuing myself from that point of view every day. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what I was doing or who I was. And I didn't know where to place my worth. It's almost like you're looking for something to grasp onto. Yeah. Outside of yourself. And so that was really hard. And it's so interesting because now looking back at it after I went through that whole journey, which was a really difficult journey for me, it's amazing because I think so many people go through that, but they think that because the validation was so high at one point in their life, like the NFL or The Bachelor, right? All these different crazy tiers that you went up, same with me, they just kind of stick at one level and they just give up and they're like, well, I guess that was the best it could have been. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which I battle with on a daily basis. I'm like, I'm like, do not think that was your peak.
No, of course
not. It will become my peak the second I choose to believe that was my peak.
Of course. And the thing is like, it could have been for that identity, maybe playing sports or something. I'm not using that example as truth, but like for me, I don't think I'd get into private equity again. Mm-hmm. So maybe in that tier, but I think it's like believing this belief within yourself that you're so much worthy of more, but expressing it in different ways. Yeah. Like when I was leaving my business, me talking about spirituality and psychology, it was actually one of the things that got me to build my team within my last company. It was a huge team. It was 80 people and that I was managing every day. But it's so funny because that's the birth and the heartbeat of my current business. I'm nowhere where I want to be. I'm still taking on clients. I'm still learning what I'm supposed to be learning. But for a minute, because you can catch yourself real quick. I was thinking like, was that my peak? Or like, was that what I was doing? Or like, and it's, you really have to catch yourself there because it's such an ego like mind fuck, where you're like, whoa, who's running the show? Yeah. Who's running the show, right? Like, how do I balance my worth out? What vision? And that's why I think like identity creation is so important at that time. Because it's like, I look at really big influencers that have like one type of message. They're teachers of some sort and amazing entrepreneurs, right? And it's like, if you took the money and everything away, what's the one thing that they all have in common? It's conviction. Yeah. Yeah. Like it's conviction in themselves. It is conviction. It is, we're not playing the money game. We're playing the game of, do you believe in you? How convicted are you in your values? How opinionated are you in the things that you believe in? Yeah. And they, of course, those things go viral and they pop off. Like I was just watching an interview with Alex Hormozy and he was like, all my videos of me saying I work like 120 hours a week pop off. So you guys think I'm like a familyless, soulless, like horrible husband person. But like the truth is like those are the videos that go viral because I'm so rooted in my own conviction.
Yeah.
Right? Where other people need to hear that to build their own conviction.
Yeah.
So for me, not leaving, but like taking a step back from my business, it was like, how much do you believe in you?
Yeah.
How much do you believe in the parts of you that you haven't nurtured?
Yeah.
The parts of you that you left behind for like all the accolades and all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
How much are you going to nurture those parts of you?
Yeah.
And oof, is that a inner child soul journey that is just it was so hard.
Well, it's
so hard.
And it's the life journey that I'm on currently as well right now. And
really?
Well, just that full belief in self that like, hey, I will figure it out. And not only will I figure it out, but I will do it better than everybody else that's done it. So, and whether or not that's true, the reality is it's true if I believe it is. And I found this in all the different career trajectory, the paths that I take right now currently. I mean, there was a point where I was in, real estate and I'm thinking, well, I don't know as much about the area as the person that's been here for 5 years. That is the truth. Someone that has been here for 5 years will know the area better than me. And so I would walk in though into consultations with potential clients, and I'm like, I really hope they don't ask me a question about the location. I really hope they don't ask me a question about the location. And then they would, and it's like the second they said it, it was like they could feel it. I must have given it off, but it was like, yeah. So I think from what I saw, like the area is, and it's like, I'm already using words. I'm already stuttering, confidence out the window. Then I realized that I'm like, if I focus on my strengths, because I'm like, okay, as a real estate agent, like what are my strengths as a human being though? Not even a real estate agent. It's like, Clayton, you're really good at connecting with people. You're really good at exuding confidence. You also have built a physical prowess that is impressive in nature. So use that to your advantage. When you walk in with your shoulders tall, you're broad, your chest tall, and walk in like you're the best agent there ever is. Like I don't have to say it. Again, like you said, a lot of things are nonverbal. But if I walk in and I'm slouched down and I'm hunched and I'm not taking up much space, and I sit down in front of a client and I'm like, "How are you doing today?" And I talk softly. I mean, they're already like, "Who is this guy?" But if I walk in, and I sit down, and it's just like, "Hey, how's it going today?" And shake their hand and just give them a firm handshake. Sit down. I'm like, so grateful that you could be here with me today. Like, let's dive right in. I'm just carrying confidence. I mean, I'm more likely to get the deal. And it's not because I'm not thinking about all the things that I lack. It's like, sure, yeah, I may not, know this area perfectly well, but if someone now says that to me, they're like, what do you know about this area? It's like, be honest with you, like, I don't like, I'm not like, I don't know, like I haven't sold a house here, but like I can, I have plenty of resources I tap into, and I've done a little bit of research, and it's a great area. And if somebody comes back and they go, well, hey, how many deals have you done here? And it's like, I haven't done many. Oh, well, I'm looking for someone that's done 50. It's like, well, hey, like that's where instead of me going, yeah, you're right, I can go, hey, like, well, I understand that you're concerned that I haven't sold here as much as the next agent, but I want to tell you, like, these are the things that I possess that are going to be able to get this deal done. And it's the confidence that I possess, and it's the ability to find an answer at any corner. And it's the things that I've done, and I sell myself, but I sell it with confidence. And that's how you get around the lack of experience or whatever. But it really comes down to my belief. The second I flounder, it's over.
Something I've been doing in my own journey lately, and I've been like really trying to be that person with the lantern for everyone else in my life, mm-hmm. and the people that follow me and my clients, is like, I did this activity once with a friend of mine who's like just a spiritual, both entrepreneurs. We're on similar soul paths.
Yeah. And
I was like, if you put yourself and your self-worth on an auction, okay, and you are like, okay, how much do I believe I'm worth? And this is an activity you do with yourself.
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, I believe I can make 10 grand a month. Mm. Cool. That feels good. That feels comfortable. Great. Go up until you hit a ceiling where like it triggers something in you. Oh, that's not possible. And like actually explore why you think that's not possible. Like actually explore it.
Yeah.
So like I've done like mini self auctions. I know that sounds like kind of like a weird analogy, where I was like, okay, 50 grand a month, 60. These are arbitrary numbers, but like, what was my cap? And it was so interesting because my cap led me back to myself and led me back to like old beliefs and old things that like came from like when I used to work at Apple, like things that like I haven't explored in a long time, like old limiting beliefs from like 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting because we can apply that in dating. We can apply that in material possessions, like, Do you see yourself wearing a Rolex, right? All these things. And it's more than just manifestation. It's more of like a mirror. Like, because here's the thing. I believe that when we carry ourselves a certain way, like if I was, if you're someone that was making 150 grand a month, you have different energy, you have a different confidence, you have a different level of F's that you care. Mm-hmm. And it shows in your posture. Yeah. It shows on how you deliver yourself. That's why some of the wealthiest people in the world wear white t-shirts. They're just chilling. They don't need to prove anything. There's a certain peace in them. Yeah. Because they've navigated those things, they've navigated that. So I love the auction analogy because it has untapped a couple of things in me where I'm like, I didn't even know that I felt that way. Yeah. I didn't even know. I just thought that I was subconsciously being triggered out in the world, right? Yeah. And I've actually played with this energetically. So okay. I did this a month ago. Yeah. So I hit a lull with my social media. And by the way, I take full self-responsibility for everything in my life. So if my shit isn't going viral or I'm not getting clients for my socials, I blame it on myself. It's on you. So I don't believe in shadow ban or any of that shit. I mean, it's true, but like whatever, right? Yeah. So I was having a really bad month. And I was like, you know what? I hate how I'm showing up. Hate it. Felt ugly. Wasn't liking what I was wearing, hated the camera setup, but I was doing it. I was consistent. Yeah. Right. I'm consistent with my content. Mm-hmm. How much do you hear that?
Well, I was following it until recently, until I realized I was like, wait, no.
So yeah. So here I am thinking I'm doing all of the things on paper, right? Victimizing myself. I'm consistent. I'm showing up. I hired a studio. I'm spending money. I'm talking about the same shit that we're talking about here. What was the difference? My energy was low. How I carried myself was low. Yeah. How I felt about myself was low. Yeah. Right. So I switch it up. I go to another studio here. You can even, for anyone listening, just go to my social media, scroll down. You can look at the differences in the videos. Yeah. Okay. I literally had a mini conversation with Source God. Whatever you follow, great, good on you. I had a conversation with this being and I was like, I'm going to be intentional today. I'm going to go to this studio. I'm going to talk about the same shit that I talked about before. If you scroll down, this time I'm going to show up with a different frequency. First 3 videos, I have over 1 million views. Same editor, same thing I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. It's because of my energy. It was also because of my belief system. Yeah. And I was okay with like not victimizing myself and being like, why does my shit suck? Instead of I was like, you know what? What if I get really creative and start playing with it a little differently? Yeah. What if I show up differently for myself? Mm-hmm. It's just that's why that saying where it's like, just start. Just go out there and just be a different version of you. You could pick like tiny little things, how you show up to a dinner wearing heels to work, right? Whatever that looks like. Yeah. But that little flip in energy is like, it's potent. Yeah. It is so potent. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've seen like with my life, I've played around with it where
you have.
Yeah. Recently. And I think this is where people, they go, oh, that's manipulation. It's like, I think there's a positive thing.
How is it manipulation?
Well, because they're saying, hey, like you're trying to be something you're not. And but and I used to feel that way. It's like, well, why are you going and doing that right now? That's not you. And it's like, well, it's not me yet. But I mean, until I do it, who knows if it's me? And so I had to tell myself that, hey, like anything new that I try is not me being, an imposter. It's me trying something new, and I'll know by the end of it if I like it or if I don't like it, and if I decide to incorporate it into my authentic self or if I don't. I do. People can read through the bullshit all the time. So if you're not being authentic, people pick up on that. And I will say that I actually think I was really good at being a chameleon, and so most of my life I was living somewhat of a facade, and I was really good at it, which is now something that I know that I can tap into, but I'm like, hey, don't go tap into being a chameleon. Like I don't want it to put something, be something I'm not.
When's your birthday?
April 29th. I'm Taurus, if that's where you're going.
No,
with
but what's your year born?
Oh, 93.
Oh, well, okay. I'll give you a book outside of this conversation.
Okay. So I got really good at it. But what I recently realized was I've been playing around with this where I'm like, hey, if you want to attract a certain type of energy, like then you need to be a certain type of energy. But what was interesting was I just started like putting myself out there. So I started basically, I started changing the things that I was doing. So dancing. And as I started dancing, I actually started changing my physical appearance. So I started wearing different clothes, and I always wanted to be expressive, but I was always trying to confine myself to a box. I was always told in medical sales when I was in that industry, like, don't blend in. You don't want the surgeons to even know that you exist. Like, because if they're not yelling at you and you don't exist, then like the job's done, And that's one less thing I have to worry about. And so I would dress a certain way. I had my hair high and tight, and what was interesting was it leaked into my dating life. So I was attracting a certain type of woman that liked the high and tight, clean cut version of Clayton. Well, what I realized is I was like, I don't like these people that I'm attracting. And so then recently I started being my authentic self and started jumping out of my comfort zone. And I started doing all these different things and expressing myself differently. And I started to go, I was around dancers, and dancers were wearing this style. And I was like, I like their style. So I started switching up my shoe game. So I went from, now I got these nice, these different shoes. These are my dance shoes, one of them. And I started changing the way that I dressed and all that. And I got a perm at one point, but then I don't have a perm anymore. This is my natural hair, but I started cutting instead of high and tight. Now I have a high fade and I have earrings. And what do you know? Like I started changing and living an authentic life, but going outside of my comfort zone and just jumping into the unknown. I started attracting finally the women that I want to attract. Completely different women. Different culture, upbringings, ethnicities. And I was like, this is what I've always wanted, but I didn't force it on me. I just started saying I wonder if I like this. And some stuff I've done, I was like, no, it's too much. I permed my hair. I was like, unnecessary. Didn't need to do it. But I've done, and I've jumped into certain different things. And I was like, okay, until I do it, I won't know what I like and what I don't like. But each time I jump into something, I can take a bit and a piece of it and ingrain it into me and create this unique, authentic self. And now it's I walk around confidently. I'm like, you can't replicate me. I'm one of one. And that's allowed me to now, though, attract that energy effortlessly. I don't have to try anymore. I just attract the energy that I am. And so it's no longer a fight. And so I'm but how that happened is I went within and I said, what do you want to do? If there was nobody else on this planet and you didn't care about fear of judgment from others, what would you do? And I was like, well, I'd dance. Okay, then go dance. Go dance. So I did. And I'm like, that changed my life. My life has changed. The opportunities that are coming now all stem from dance. And I don't want to be a professional dancer. I'm not going to be a backup dancer. That's not what I want to do. But dancing helps. I took a piece of that and ingrained that into my authentic being. And now that is bringing opportunities. Not that I'm trying to become a backup dancer. It's no, I just took a part of that and put that into me. And so now it's what did that bring? Well, a whole slew of different opportunities.
How life-changing was this past year for you?
It's still changing. Okay. And I have stuff that I can't even talk about that that are coming down the pipeline that I'm like, people are about to see the real Clayton, the realest version of me that's ever existed. I'm pumped.
So unrelated to this particular podcast, but I'll just share with you. So we are born exactly a month apart.
Okay.
Same year.
Same year.
Okay. I'm March 22nd.
Okay.
1993. I went deep down into spirituality and all this stuff. And I have another friend who has the same birthday. Mm-hmm. Him and I are on kindred paths. Our year, the meaning of our lives for 93, if you're born in 93, don't hold me to this because it's a certain range of months, but I know you're in it, is our lifelong lesson is to step more into spirituality, more into our own authentic sense of self, but it's to be more direct. It's to be more direct in our conviction and what we want, because we're excellent chameleons. We're amazing. We know what people want to hear. We know how people want us to show up. We can feel it, you know? So a huge life lesson for me is,
oh yeah, I'm getting chills. Yeah.
A huge life lesson for me was, okay, be more direct, stop. Just because you know what people are feeling, just because you know what people want of you, and you're so good at sales. That's why I'm great at sales. You're great at sales because great at marketing. Yeah. You know what people want.
Yeah.
But you abandon yourself on the way there. Mm-hmm. And it happens in dating. It happens in business, right? And so that's why our channel with money is so big, because we can pick up trends. We can pick up all these things, but we end up being 9,000 versions of ourselves and no one ever gets the real one.
Yeah.
And so a huge part of my path, and the last year, by the way, is huge transformation for our years. But a huge part of my path was, what do I actually really want? Mm-hmm. And it was a question that I never really asked myself.
Yeah.
And then when I did, I was like, it's not what everyone else wants. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
It was, creating my Oracle card deck. I came from private equity. Half of my following used to be men in their 40s. Mm-hmm. And I finally flipped that. And was it rough? Yeah. I faced rejection, doubt, fears, shame, videos having only 30 views, no comment, just being oh my God. But it was a lesson for me. It's how much do you believe in you? How much do you believe in the real you?
Yeah.
You had conviction for being all these different versions of yourself that they weren't fake, but they weren't entirely you.
Yeah.
So can you sit in yourself and can you honor it?
Yeah.
And that was, I think, a big part of this year for me, was being and by the way, the confidence that I have now, if you interviewed, we wouldn't have been energetically aligned about 6 months ago because I was still going through that.
Yeah.
But it's it's learning all these deeper lessons that contribute to success and you know, tying it back to financial success, all those things, because you're handling, like, you're popping the hood on the car and you're like, okay, let's really get our hands dirty and like focus on what matters, right? Because outside it looks great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Really a beautiful way to just kind of bundle this all up is it's all energy. You know, it's like money is a form of energy, you know, and it's a transfer and it's a back and forth, and everything is a vibration and a frequency. And at the end of the day, though, it's like, if you want to go achieve these things, you have to look within. You got to stop pointing fingers at everybody else and saying, well, they got $1 million handout or a gift and this, that, and the other. It's like, fine, they did. And that's just the way that's
their journey.
But also understand that when you're given $1 million gift, like, it comes with a negative downside of like, expecting. I know people that were always given money, they expected it. And then when they weren't getting it, they had to learn the hard lesson of hard work. It's like, because they weren't used to working hard. So there's always a negative side to it. But really to tie this all up, it's like, at the end of the day, like, if you want to get to a place, you have to look within. That is the bottom line. Stop blaming other people, because you'll continue to play victim. And I played victim for a lot of my life. And it's like, you'll keep playing victim, and then no one's going to pull you out of that corner or hand you the silver spoon, like, until you get up, dust yourself off, and say, I'm going to go achieve this, and stop making excuses. And where am I blocking myself? And it's like, all your answers are within, but you have to be mindful. You have to get into that present moment. You have to be conscious, and you have to address it head on, and you have and take it and say, okay, why am I not where I need to be right now? What am I doing wrong? And what do I need to change? And that is what it's all about. And so that's why we're both in the position that we're in today. And it's awesome to hear that you're succeeding and that your journey is going to continue to prosper, and you're going to be more direct than ever. And I could go down a rabbit hole on being more direct, but
it's such a lesson.
Because I'm finding that, but you know, we'll have that discussion at another time, because I know that we could continue to go on and go on and go on. But Sabrina, for what it was worth today, I think we scratched the surface. I think we touched the tip of the iceberg.
I would love to keep talking about this.
There's so much that I know that we didn't even touch on, like, deep spirituality, because I know that's another facet of, like, we talked about it. I mean, I think you gave a great high level overview of, like, just scratching the surface. It's intrigued me, and I know it's intrigued those that have listened. So we'll definitely have a further conversation and, like, peel back another layer and go deeper. But I really felt that this was a great starter for people to be like, okay, hey, whoa, I kind of see what she's saying. Like, I can start to implement this in my life and be mindful. And so, but for those that are like, hey, I'm too impatient and I want to, like, go to that next level before you guys, like, I don't want to wait on your guys' next podcast or next conversation. So for those that want to start diving into what you're about and grow with you, where's the best place that they can find you?
Just follow my Instagram, Sabrina M. Guler, or my website, sabrinaguler.com.
So then you make it easy like me. ClaytonEcker.com is my website. Clayton Ecker is all my handles. It's funny, like, there's probably more synergy than we realize based on what you're saying.
Probably.
Like,
that's changed quite a bit too.
But that's what's so crazy is, like, it's so interesting that, like, we both actually, like, I make it super simplistic, and it's like, use my name, nothing fancy. I don't know. There could be some type of energetic tie in there in parallel, but at the end of the day, it's super, super fascinating. So Sabrina, thank you so much for being here today and talking with me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.